A fleet owner in 1985 drops $120,000 on 10 new trucks, all powered by what the salesman promised was a bulletproof engine. 18 months later, every single one is sitting in the shop with catastrophic failures. That's not a horror story. That happened with one of the engines on this list. Here's the kicker. Choosing the wrong engine didn't just mean downtime. It meant bankruptcy. Owner-operators lived or died by what was under the hood. We're ranking 10 classic truck engines from absolute disasters to unstoppable legends using 3 brutal criteria: torque delivery, rebuild durability, and legendary status among the guys who actually turned wrenches on these machines. Stick around till the end because number 1 defined what American trucking sounded like for an entire generation. Let's dive in. Number 10. The Ford 7.8-liter Brazilian diesel. Ford imported this engine thinking they'd found a budget solution for medium-duty trucks. What they actually found was a disaster waiting to happen. This inline-6 was designed for lighter South American loads, not the punishment American truckers dished out daily. The problem started immediately. Injection pump failures became so common that mechanics kept spares on the shelf. Head gasket issues plagued these engines from day one. But here's what really killed it. Parts availability was a nightmare. You would order a component and wait weeks while your truck sat idle. Ford eventually gave up on the whole experiment, leaving owners with engines nobody wanted to touch. It wasn't just unreliable, it was orphaned. Number 9. The Caterpillar 3208. This one hurts because it wore the CAT badge, and CAT built their reputation on engines that outlasted the trucks they powered. The 3208 was different. Caterpillar designed it as a disposable engine, and truckers hated that philosophy with a passion. Rebuild costs on these V8s often exceeded the price of a replacement engine. The cylinder liners wore out fast under heavy loads. Cooling system problems turned into catastrophic overheating. Mechanics called it the throwaway cat, and that nickname stuck. Sure, it made decent power for its size, but when an engine can't be economically rebuilt, it's not a classic. It's just expensive scrap metal. Number 8. The early International DT4666. Now, later versions of this engine became legends, but those first-generation DT466s were maintenance nightmares that gave International a black eye. The promise was simple: a straightforward inline-6 that any mechanic could fix. The reality was head gasket failures that became legendary for all the wrong reasons. These engines would blow head gaskets with depressing regularity. You would fix it, run for 6 months, and do it again. The injector cups leaked. The fuel systems were finicky. Owners who bought these early models learned expensive lessons about waiting for manufacturers to work out the bugs. International eventually fixed every single problem, but that first generation? Brutal. Number 7. The Cummins. Big Cam Y, first generation. This one almost killed Cummins' reputation before they became the king of diesel. The Big Cam Y made jaw-dropping power for its era, but it couldn't hold together under sustained heavy loads. Connecting rod failures, crankshaft problems, main bearing issues that turned engines into boat anchors. Cummins knew they had a disaster on their hands. They went back to the drawing board and completely redesigned the bottom end for the Big Cam 2 and 3, which became bulletproof. But that first generation? Truckers who got stuck with them watched their competitors running past them toward the next truck stop while they sat broken down. Raw power means nothing if the engine grenades itself. Number 6. The Detroit Diesel 6V92. This 2-stroke V6 screamed like a banshee and drank fuel like it was going out of style. It couldn't match the torque of its bigger brother, the 8V71, and it burned through oil at a rate that made accountants cry. The fuel economy was so bad that owner-operators calculated whether they could even afford to run a load. Sure, it had that classic Detroit scream, but it was all noise and no substance compared to the legendary 8-cylinder. Mechanics spent more time adjusting valves and replacing blower seals than actually driving. It was the engine you got when you couldn't afford what you actually wanted. These next engines proved something crucial. You didn't need to be perfect to be legendary. You just needed to show up every single day and do the job without drama. Number 5. The Mack E7. This inline 6 was the definition of steady. It didn't break records. It didn't win bragging rights at his truck stops. What it did was deliver consistent torque day after day, year after year, without the catastrophic failures that plagued lesser engines. The E7 made around 350 to 427 horsepower, depending on the spec, with torque figures that satisfied without being jaw-dropping. Mechanics appreciated how straightforward it was to work on. No exotic components, no mysterious electronic gremlins in the earlier mechanical versions. Just a solid, dependable power plant that moved freight without complaint. But here's why it never quite reached legendary status. It was boring. Truckers respected it, but they didn't love it. It lacked the drama of a screaming Detroit or the brute force reputation of the engines we're about to cover. The E7 was the reliable friend who always showed up on time, but never told interesting stories. In the world of classic truck engines, that kept it out of the top tier. Number 4. The Caterpillar 3406B. This is where CAT redeemed itself after the 3208 disaster. The B model 3406 was the pre-electronic version that mechanics could actually diagnose and fix without a laptop. That matters more than you might think. This inline 6 delivered between 350 and 425 horsepower with torque curves that made pulling heavy loads feel effortless. The mechanical fuel system meant you could adjust and repair it with basic tools. No sensors failing in the middle of nowhere. No electronic modules that cost thousands to replace. What made the 3406B special was its rebuildability. These engines regularly hit 500,000 miles before needing major work. When that work came, mechanics could tear them down and build them back up without exotic equipment. The later electronic versions made more power, but they couldn't match the B model's reputation for mechanical honesty. This was an engine designed in an era when engineers expected things to be fixed, not replaced. Number 3. The later International DT36. This is redemption done right. International took every single complaint about those early disasters and fixed them. The result was an engine that became the backbone of medium-duty trucking in America. These later DT466s routinely hit 1 million miles with proper maintenance. The head gasket problems? Solved. The injector cup issues? Gone. International engineered durability back into the platform and created something special. This inline 6 made between 210 and 300 horsepower depending on the year and spec, which doesn't sound impressive until you realize it was designed for constant stop-and-go work that would kill flashier engines. Delivery trucks, dump trucks, buses, and utility vehicles all ran DT466s because they simply refused to quit. Mechanics loved them because parts were everywhere and repairs were straightforward. This wasn't the most powerful engine on our list, but it might be the most important for keeping American commerce moving every single day. Now we're entering different territory. The next two engines didn't just move freight, they became legends that truckers still talk about decades later. Next up, the top 2 unstoppable legends. Number 2, the Cummins N14. This engine saved Cummins. After the big Cam I disaster, the company needed to prove they could build something that combined brutal power with bulletproof reliability. The N14 delivered both. This inline 6 made between 310 and 525 horsepower depending on the spec. But the real story was torque. We're talking 1,250 to 1,850 pound-feet of twist that redefined what a straight six could do. That kind of torque meant pulling 80,000 pounds up mountain grades without downshifting. It meant passing power that made other trucks look like they were standing still. The Selex system changed everything. Cummins introduced electronic control that actually worked, giving drivers precise fuel delivery and diagnostics that helped prevent problems before they became catastrophic failures. But here's the genius. Mechanics could still work on these engines without needing a computer science degree. Rebuilds on N14s became legendary. These engines would run 500,000 miles, get torn down to the block, built back up, and run another 500,000 without drama. The aftermarket parts industry exploded around the N14 because so many were on the road. Mechanics still prefer working on these over modern emissions-strangled engines because they're honest. No diesel particulate filters, no DF systems. Just mechanical components doing exactly what they're designed to do. The N14 proved that electronic control and rebuildability weren't mutually exclusive. It became the engine of choice for owner-operators who needed maximum power with minimum downtime. Number 1, the Detroit Diesel 8V71. This is it. The engine that defined an entire era of American trucking. That signature two-stroke scream announced a truck's arrival from miles away. You didn't just hear an 8V71, you felt it in your chest. The supercharger whine became the soundtrack of American highways in the 70s and 80s. Truckers could identify an 8V71 with their eyes closed, and that sound meant power. This V8 made between 238 and 318 horsepower, which doesn't sound impressive until you understand two-stroke power delivery. Every revolution was a power stroke. The torque came on like a sledgehammer and never let up. That brutal, instant power made the 8V71 perfect for heavy haul work, where you needed to get a massive load moving from a dead stop. But here's what made it truly legendary. These engines are still running 50-plus years later. The two-stroke design meant fewer parts to break. The blower and the mechanical simplicity made them rebuildable forever. You can still find parts because the cult following around 8V71s keeps manufacturers in business. Mechanics who grew up on these engines talk about them like old friends. The valve adjustments every 25,000 miles, the oil consumption that was just part of the deal, the fuel economy that made accountants nervous but never stopped the engine from doing its job. This wasn't the most efficient engine. It wasn't the cleanest. It was the most legendary. The 8V71 didn't just move freight. It defined what American trucking sounded like, felt like, and meant to an entire generation of drivers. The common thread connecting these legendary engines, brutal mechanical simplicity, rebuildability that made them immortal, and honest engineering that didn't hide behind electronics. Modern engines may meet emission standards, but they'll never be classics. If you want more deep dives into trucking history, subscribe and check out our next video on the trucks that changed everything.